My goodness.
Talk no more, none of that shit. I'm just doing the same.
Let's go, hey.
Got me started, wrist frames carded, pull up double parking, don't even pay like I'm the owner, my young niggas retarded.
Yo, what up, guys? We're on the clock. It's your boy Caleb back again with the usual suspect, Julian Mendelson, and today we are joined by the lovely Maxwell Baumbach, good friend of the pod from over at No Ceilings. Third straight No Ceilings guy, but I don't mind it. You guys are, I always say you guys are the top of the top, the cream of the crop. So we're happy to have you. How have we been doing, Baum?
I'm doing good. I am in that weird kind of in-between phase right now where it's like the international leagues are starting, but college hasn't. And it's like I want to be in the full swing of like draft season, and it's not quite there, but like we're getting a taste. We're getting a taste of it. So I'm in a good place. I'm happy, but yeah, it's weird being in this kind of in between the true kind of off season of draft world and the full swing of it.
Yeah, we definitely hear that. I'd say that definitely we've been talking a lot of college basketball, like I mentioned right before we started recording. So it's nice to take a little break from that. I think for me and Julian, it's just been kind of a, beating a lot to the same drums lately. Just a lot of, this guy's going to be good. He could take a leap on the ex-college team, and this guy's a good like 4-year player, grad, senior, dope. He's going to drop like 18 a game. But what does this do for us as draft scouts? So now we're actually getting into the guys who are definitive prospects and guys that we're going to be looking at, come July. Julian, what's the word?
I'm excited, brother. I mean, tic-tac-toe, 3 No Ceilings guys in a row. It's a good pot. I'm just like, I think this is the first Ignite team where I've like actually been excited about more than just like 2 guys. And like first off, like before we say anything, I've been wanting to do this for the last 3 years. Like, shout out Jason Hart, who has been just like doing such a good job of coaching these guys like year after year. Like, say what you will about like, however many guys are lottery picks every year, but like the guys that he's coaching are ready to play in the NBA, and like 100% of the credit goes to him on that, because like he has done a phenomenal job with this Ignite team. And I think he is going to have, I mean, we'll get into it at some point, but the best group of talent that I think he's had ever.
This has been the first year that I've like really been worried about him getting poached. Like it seemed like in that first Perth game, it was like, I don't know that like the Jason Hart secret is going to be kept as long as I would like. As somebody in the draft space who just wants to see prospects get developed and become the best versions themselves, it was like some NBA team's going to drop a bag, and the NBA as a league has got to step in and be like, we got a bigger one for you. Just stay right there, man. Stay right there, because he's doing such a great job.
Yeah, he's been doing exceptional. I mean, just the consistency and developing guys, kind of take their game to the next level within the team context has been really impressive. I think he's turned a lot of guys. I think he'll turn a lot of guys, especially on this team, into much more complete basketball players than they would have been staying, in other places, or for some of these guys going to college. I guess we can kind of start. We spoke before. We don't really talk much NBA on here anymore. It's not really me and Julian's. I don't know. It's not really our thing, I guess. I don't really.
We watch it. We enjoy
watching it.
Yeah,
I'm more of a casual NBA fan. You know what I mean? I like to think of myself that way. But, when it comes to the draft stuff, trades are always important. But, I mean, just in the grand landscape of basketball, as people who love basketball, it's hard to talk about anything this week without, thinking about and reflecting on the aftermath of the Damian Lillard trade. Initial thoughts when you saw the news drop, Maxwell Baumbach.
Yeah, it's terrifying from a Milwaukee Bucks standpoint. Giannis has never played with a guy who can create his own shot from 3 like that. And I think that's just a very terrifying proposition on paper. The idea of how teams are going to have to guard that high pick and roll when they run it is like, it's really tricky. And I think I think other teams made good moves in response, which we'll get to in a little bit. But I think just on paper, it's tough because there are so few guys that are able to switch that action. Do you show? Do you like hard hedge and try to recover against Giannis? Do you have to leave somebody open to have, someone from the weak side help in the corner? Are you going to leave Brook Lopez open in the corner? You can't do that. So you've got to be really careful about how you guard that high pick and roll, and especially with shooters like Brook Lopez, like Chris Middleton, and then even just like a competent shooter like a Pat Connaughton can really be difficult to deal with if he's going to get open shots, because you have to pinch toward the middle of the lane to stop a rolling Giannis Antetokounmpo. It's tough. It's really, really tough to guard a team with that kind of lineup. I thought the campaign signing was like kind of a desperation grab that came in the aftermath, because the backup point guard minutes were kind of like scary hours after you lose Drew. I mean, like Grayson isn't like a real point guard, but he can like kind of handle those minutes.
It's really been a loss since they lost Javon Carter.
Yes. Yeah. You don't have Javon there anymore. Like he's been gone for a while. So now it's tricky. So I think you got to hope that campaign has a bounce back campaign, and that maybe I had to do it. And that maybe Ty Washington can build on a big year in the G League and maybe show some things in the regular season. I don't know. To me, it seems like there's a real confidence still in a guy like Beauchamp maybe having a breakout year, maybe Jay Crowder getting back into the swing of things, because like from a depth perspective, they're pretty thin, but I think a lot of teams out east are thin now and really consolidating. But anytime you can get a player like Damian Lillard and the cost is Grayson Allen, Drew Holiday, and a few picks for like that far down the road, and that are two of them are swaps, you got to do it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that the two names that you were like perfect, Crowder and Beauchamp, are the two guys that immediately popped in my head. Is like, these guys have to have good seasons for this to really work out and flush out to be a championship quality team. Great anecdote about the kind of the point guard play. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know. There's no real true point guard on that roster anymore. I mean, as much as we want to talk about Damian Lillard's passing ability, he's generally underrated in that aspect. He's not necessarily a pass first guy. So it'll be interesting to see how a player like Giannis can, modify his game to be more of an off-ball threat, especially in like the pick and roll. I know that's really what everybody's talking about. Two of the best pick and roll players in the league per any advanced analytic that you want to throw out there. I don't know. I think it'll still be interesting. Julian, do you have any words on like the Bucks perspective before we kind of flip to the other aspects of the trade?
Look, I mean, it's going to be pick your poison in the playoffs. I mean, we have two guys that teams literally scheme to stop individually, right? Teams against Giannis Antetokounmpo build the wall and have three guys standing in the paint waiting for him to come, trouncing down the lane. And with Dame Lillard, most teams have at least one guy standing at half court waiting for him to get there, so he doesn't just randomly, take 2 steps across half court and shoot a 3. And I mean, last I checked, the math doesn't really add up that you can do both of those things at the same time. So, I mean, Milwaukee's going to be so exciting on offense because either guy can hurt you at any time. And it's like, you're going to really just have to decide, like, all right, are we going to get beat by Dame tonight, or are we going to get beat by Giannis tonight? Or are we going to, like Max said, like, are we just going to let Brook Lopez and Chris Middleton hang out on the perimeter and let them beat us tonight? There's no good answer for a defense on this. And, the Bucks are going to score a lot of points. The question is a backcourt of Pat Connaughton and Damian Lillard good enough to stop the other backcourts in the East?
Let's talk about one of the backcourts in the East that was formed by this trade. I mean, talking about the guy who's going to be picking Dame up, the minute he crosses the line, it's going to be the guy that Giannis spoke so highly about the whole time at his media day interview. Like, Drew Holiday is the epitome of what it means to be a Milwaukee Buck. Like, we're not champions without Drew Holiday. We're not the Milwaukee Bucks without Drew Holiday. And now he's on the Boston Celtics, a team that has given the Bucks absolute headaches over. I mean, I'm obviously from Wisconsin, and I'm around a lot of casual basketball fans, and most of them are diehard Bucks fans. And the one team that they hate is that the one team they don't understand how they beat them is the Heat. And then the other team that they just absolutely hate because they're so good is the Celtics. Other than that, no, the Milwaukee doesn't care about any other team. And the fact that Drew Holiday was able to get, shipped to Boston after, it looked like the landing spot in Portland was really not a great fit. But then nowadays with Boston, I don't know. Boston looks even scarier. They really have a big four over there. And I was thinking about kind of earlier today when how I was going to frame a lot of this discussion is like, holy crap, there's a lot of super teams now in the NBA. Like, I mean, these are two teams. Like we saw, another super team involved in this trade, and we'll get to the Suns after. Obviously, as the resident Suns fan on the podcast, I have to weigh in about losing DeAndre Ayton, which is just, I don't know, it's a head case kind of to try and figure out. But I feel like the Drew Holiday to the Boston Celtics is going to be the biggest aspect of this trade, and I feel like it will be underly talked about by the mainstream media until midpoint in the year when Boston's far and away the best team in the league, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I thought it was interesting too that like the worst playoff series team ever had was against Drew Holiday and Rajon Rondo, and that's like pretty close defensively when you've got even this older version of Drew Holiday alongside Derek White. Like Dame in that playoff series in 2018, it was scored 18.5 points per game, but was 35% from the field, 30% from three. And
I've
he had
talked about the
19
Dame
assists
playoff stuff
to
in a previous
16
pod.
turnovers. Yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like that. I love Dame. I'm a big believer in Dame, but like the worst playoff series he had was against that type of really tough, feisty guard-led defensive backcourt. So I think from a Boston standpoint, I understand it's 2-for-1 and the depth and whatever. But again, I think just a player like Drew Holiday, you go get that guy.
Yeah, and I think that there was major questions about where a guy like Robert Williams is going to fit with that team anyway, with, the kind of stacked front court that they would have had with, trying to figure out the minutes and who's closing between Horford and Porzingis. And I think now that they've just kind of committed to that, the fact that, Porzingis is going to be our four and Horford's going to kind of defend the basket and we'll let Kristaps play a little bit more on the perimeter, which will be an interesting thing. But I think when you have a guy like Drew Holiday, they're defensively. I mean, Brown, White,
Nasty.
and Holiday is disgusting. And
yeah,
I don't know. I think it's just there couldn't have been a more devious move for Boston to make this offseason than stealing Drew Holiday from the Bucks. And I think that if you would have told me at the beginning of the offseason that Drew Holiday was going to end up on the Celtics and it wasn't going to be that expensive, like they weren't going to really have to give up draft capital or, give up a guy like a Jaylen Brown to get him, I'm like,
yeah.
That's a win.
Well, I think the sneaky thing with Boston too was like we forget that they got like 900 second round picks on draft night too. So like there is like their depth, and it's like it's gonna be like pretty easy for them to get like.
I mean, we all know about Jordan Walsh.
Like, well, and if you can get a 7th or 8th man for a couple second round picks and cap filler, like I don't know. I'm not totally worried about the depth at this stage. I think they're going to be able to get a 7th, 8th man relatively easily.
Yeah, I think they'll be fine. And then I guess the last part, I mean, the last two teams we'll have to talk about is the teams out west now. First thoughts about Portland. I mean, I texted Julian the other day and I was like, I honestly love Portland's roster after getting Robert Williams. I think that they look even better to me for the next 5 years or even just the next 3 years than they would have with Dame. So, Julian, what are your thoughts on Portland with this?
Dude, I'm stoked for Portland. I honestly, first off, I want to say to all the entitled Heat fans who thought you were getting Dame Lillard, y'all suck. I'm glad you didn't get him. They've been whining about it on Twitter for the last 2 months. Blah, blah, blah. We deserve him. It's loyalty, blah, blah, blah. No, you guys are the worst. You're not getting anything. You guys are going to be like middling this year and lose to one of the two teams that
they're going to beat the 76ers. Watch, just because you said that.
Of course they're going to beat the 76ers. We're a disaster. I don't think we're going anywhere. But yeah, man, I love what Portland did. I think it's a good reset button for Ayton, as well as Nurk. Honestly, he was kind of in and out of that lineup with injuries at times and never really got a chance to kind of show his mettle off. I think he is going to be huge for the Phoenix Suns. I think that's a really underrated part of this trade. because Nurk is like a
Rebounding.
double-double guy consistently. And, if Beal, Booker, and Durant are putting up 70 shots a game, like someone has to be there to go get the rebound because it's probably not going to be one of those three guys. And like he's just a guy who just like digs out boards. Like he doesn't have to put up a ton of points. He's going to get points on putbacks and all this stuff. And for Ayton, like it's an opportunity to like prove how good he can be as a big with an opportunity to kind of be like the guy in the front court. Like he's always been overshadowed on that team by their backcourt. And I think with a young backcourt and guys who are like looking to develop who aren't already established, it's a great opportunity for him to kind of be like the vet in a sense on this team. I know they have Jeremy Grant too, but like he's like the guy in their front court. And I think, he could have a really big season. I don't think it would be that crazy for them to make the play this year.
I think it's a stretch. I think
the plan is probably like a high hopes type of ordeal. But I mean, we saw a guy leave Phoenix last year and have a breakout season pretty much immediately with Mikal Bridges, and just kind of what that change of scenery can do for a player, especially when they've been in the same system for a couple of years. And I think with the guy like Ayton, when you look at Scoot Henderson, the fit alongside Scoot, I think it's exceptional. Scoot Henderson displayed, throughout his time with the Ignite that he was a dynamic creator in the pick and roll and dynamic getting to the basket. And I think that bodes really well for a guy like Ayton who what they want him to do ideally is play close to the basket, get a couple post-up touches, but mostly to be a lob threat in the pick and roll. And, hopefully he can turn into a little bit better of a shooter from 15 feet and maybe develop into a little bit more of a popper, but I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I think that the Ayton fit though is pretty good with Portland because, like you said, it's kind of a barren landscape there. Besides where Nurkic was kind of doing, besides Grant, they don't really have any front court players. So it'll be interesting. Now they have Rob Will, who I love. Get Time Lord out there in Portland. Hopefully he'll have a more secure and stable role so he can continue to blossom into a great defensive player that we all know he can be. But pivoting to Phoenix, I don't know how to feel, man. I felt like if we were going to get rid of Ayton, I would have liked to have seen a better defender come our way. I think that we really needed, and not to knock Nas Little, because that's really the one thing he can do consistently every night, which is defend and give good effort. And we have a Koji, and we have some guys that are kind of geared towards a defensive mindset. But I don't know how we got better by getting Nurkic over Ayton. I guess maybe it's by proxy that we got better, having three guys that contribute versus just one that, although it's 18 and like 11 every night, but it feels like a very empty 18 and 11, especially when you're kind of just riding off whether KD or Book gets them over the top. One of those guys got to drop 30 for us to win. But I don't know. It'll be interesting. I don't know. What are you guys' takes on kind of the Suns? Does this make them a championship contender, like more of a stable one? I don't know if I really had them as the favorites yet. I like Denver still to repeat. Now I like the Bucks and Celtics even more. So I don't really know how this moves for the Suns. I think the Lakers had a much better offseason than the Suns did now, even with the Ayton moving on. So
yeah, I thought the Nurkic move, I had kind of similar feelings about it. I'd like a little bit more of a defensive punch at the center position. I sneaky like the Grayson Allen element of it. Like I think Grayson Allen's like a nice kind of defensive guard, like a little something they don't have. But do I like that as a return for DeAndre Ayton? No, but to me, it just seems like one of those deals where like there's interpersonal elements where like something had to happen, but just from a basketball standpoint, I don't like it. Like, I don't know, maybe that was like what they needed to do from an organizational standpoint. But yeah, I worry a lot about where Nurkic is at, even just from like a health standpoint, let alone like how else is he going to be handling like getting involved in a lot of on-ball actions in the perimeter in a playoff series and like being targeted and pick and roll. Like that scares me a lot. And then even then too, it's like Kevin Durant can like really work as like a weak side rim protector and like a help defender and things like that. But I don't know that that's like what he wants to be doing at this stage in his career, or that that's like a great use of him is like go fill all the gaps for us as a 4 on defense. Like that's not, I don't know.
I think that's why we have a Kogi, and I think that's what he'll do. And I think we're just hoping that Nas Little can come in and play, 70 games to stay healthy.
That's why you guys got
play 18 to 22 minutes a night, and we'll be all right. At least not be a negative plus minus. I think Allen adds some major value shooting wise in the playoffs. That's something that we haven't had. Looking at the shots that Cam Payne has taken in the past from 3, I would have much rather had Grayson Allen and have the Bucks have Cam Payne back in the final series. It was painful to see how lackluster our 3-point shooting was, and I think Grayson Allen provides a good punch from deep now that we don't have Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges. So it'll be good. I think that I'm glad that you highlighted that ad as well, because that was the one that made me at least a little happy. Moving on to the main course that we gave a little appetizer, but now it's time for the main course. The 2 games between the Perth Wildcats and the G League Ignite felt very, and Julian will get into it, but it felt very like a new rendition of last year with Metropolitans 92 versus the Ignite, where we had Scoot Henderson versus Wembanyama, and this year it's Alexander Sarr versus the G League Ignite Beatles version. And I think that most people's takeaway was that Alexander Sarr was probably the best player on the court, or at least prospect-wise. I think Ron Holland was far and away probably the most consistent player on the court, and he displayed that by, leading the game, both games in scoring, being dominant on the glass, 8 steals across 2 games. Some just really, really good numbers, and looks like he's just going to be a good player in that NBA day one. But Julian's got some takes on Alexander Sarr, and he's had them. We had a tweet go up at the end of July, and what did it say, Julian? It said, "Who are we high on? Alexander Sarr,
Smith,
the Apostle, and these have been still leaving these games. They're still the 2 guys that I'm most impressed with. I think Sarr looks really promising. His shooting ability at that size presents some interesting comps, and I don't know, Julian. What are your takeaways from Sarr? You were so high on him in July. What is this these couple games done for you there?
I'll be honest, I'm even higher on Alex Sarr than I was before. So going into watching the games, because I watched a lot of the highlights of Sarr. I never really got a full experience of what he can do and how he can take over. Kind of putting the context together, okay, these are the skills he has. I can see them in small flashes, but this is what it looks like when Alex Sarr is putting minutes together and the impact he has on the NBA court. And it's amazing, man. I mean, it's amazing. The guy, I just want to start with the defense, because I think for me, the shooting's cool, the off the dribble stuff is fine, but the defense is just something different. I mean, he was meeting Ron Holland at the rim. He was meeting Buzelis at the rim. He was getting out to the perimeter to contest shots. He's still the one thing that bothered me on both ends of the ball is his footwork is super clunky offensively, and I think he's got to work that out. He traveled 8 times over the course of those 2 games. It was kind of ridiculous. But I mean, the jump shot is so smooth, and the potential for the off the dribble stuff. I don't want to go over the top here, and it's going to sound like I am, but I think he is a less upside, more polished version of Victor Wembanyama. No, he's not going to be the face of the league. He's not going to be this dynamic, crazy dude who's doing all this stuff. But as a 7-footer who can shoot the ball and play really good defense and rim run, he's going to be almost as good as it gets. And I think he's as good as it gets in this class, honestly. There's another guy who we'll talk about later who I also really like to be a rim runner. But this kid has ridiculous upside as a 5. I think he at this point, unless anything changes drastically, and we can get into some of the issues that I have with Ron Holland when we talk about Ron Holland, but I don't see a world where this kid's not the #1 pick in the
I think he's making a really strong case. Like, I think we're all disagree with Wembanyama. Is I do think Wembanyama's physical dimensions matter quite a bit, and I do think that the clunkiness of Sarr's footwork matters quite a bit. And like we've seen Sarr play in a couple of these NBL games now, and he's just not the same type of scorer that Wembanyama is. Like Wembanyama was dropping like 25 a game in France last year, and like Sarr, I think is a guy who's just going to be a little bit more within the course of the game is a scorer rather than like a full-on takeover guy. But I liked him a lot coming to the year. He was 4 for me before that game, and like now that feels low. Like it's crazy. He can really pass the ball. Like I really like how he sees the court. I think the happy feet travel thing is just like what kills me, and it happens so much. Like I this is gonna sound weird, but I think Max Lewis is going to be an interesting case study for Alex Sarr, because that was a big problem that Max Lewis had at Pepperdine last year. Was like I've caught the ball and I took too many steps, like trying to go. Like, just is that how correctable is that? Because it's not something that you really see a whole lot of. But like you said, the defense it's wild. Like his ability to just move with smaller players at that size, and he just gets off the floor so effortlessly, and he has that nice, light, easy second jump. His motor hasn't shut off, which like in the OTE film, like if you really wanted like pick and prod, one of the things he could say is like his effort level wasn't always that high, but like hasn't been an issue recently. And I don't know. I think there's still some like concerns about the fact the physicality end of it, that he is skinny. He can get bumped off his spot at times. He can be bumped into picking up his dribble. I didn't see the SEM game yet, but I heard that like Tyler Cook was kind of bossing him around a little bit. He's going to have to fill out, but he's young. I'm not super worried about it. I like how his frame looks. I like the width of his shoulders. I do think he's going to get there and be able to play. I feel better about him eventually playing the 5 than I did about Evan Mobley when Evan Mobley came out. So I think even at the 4, it's hard not to like a guy who's that big and can guard like that, and is showing the confidence in his shot that Sarr has shown so far. So I'm really into Alex Sarr. I like him a lot, and I think he's absolutely going to be in that number 1 pick discussion.
Yeah. Sorry, I almost got kicked out of my room here for a second, but me and Julian have like kind of tossed and turned over this class and where people are going to latch on to number 1 overall pick wise. I think we found it. I think that the default number 1 overall pick quickly switched from people that were either Holland or Buzelis guys to now that there's like this third group of, draft scouts and draft heads that are going to be, poking and prodding at the Alexander Sarr thing. Like you said, I think the defense is going to be his strongest trait, as a floor, as a prospect. And I think that there's another, I think you guys covered the base as well. I don't really have much to say beyond that. I think the shooting will be good, and I think the defense is going to be his outlier part of his skill set. But I think that there's another guy who people might be writing off too early with Holland. But I think that his defensive floor is even higher than Alexander Sarr's. So I'm interested to see where his development goes, as kind of a guy who could be a franchise player. In a super small sample size for Holland, he was 75% shooting off the catch, 64.7% at the rim, 1.211 points per possession in transition, and a surprising 1.429 points per possessions in pick and roll ball handler situations, including passes. Did some things offensively that make you go, okay, he definitely has a good feel for the game, can shoot it a little bit. That's not really a huge worry. But I think, he displayed an incredible ability to play passing lanes, kind of really nitpick and play like a safety type of role on defense, where he kind of just roamed around, was able to kind of do whatever he wanted. It was very clear that he was the most athletic and dominant physically player on the floor in both those games against Perth. And I'll be interested to see what you guys think his floor is as a player. And I think, going forward, if there's a guy that is the safest pick, very similar to a Scoot Henderson situation last year, I think Ron Holland's going to be the guy that, outplays, Buzelis and Almanza consistently throughout this year, and will notch himself into a pretty safe top 3 overall draft pick. But obviously too early to tell, but from the early returns. I don't think he's going to be as good offensively, 25% shooting off the dribble. Definitely something that he needs to work on. I don't think that he's a phenomenal passer by any means, but I think that his feel is definitely there. I don't know. What do you guys think? I think if you had to pick between him and like Apollo Banchero as a prospect, I don't think that there's like a huge gap between those two. If Ron Holland can keep adding to his game on offense, his offense is going to meet where Apollo's defense is at. And, his defense can kind of rise that level of a player like Paulo offensively, in terms of safety. If you get what I mean, like the bigger forward.
I like Paulo a lot more as a prospect.
Okay. I was just curious.
Yeah. So I'm a much more offensively inclined person in general. Like I just think
I'm
offense
opposite, so it totally makes sense.
So I think there's just a real palpable difference in terms of their feel for the game. I think with Ron Holland, there are definitely passing flashes, and I've liked that with him. I don't think he has any sort of balance to his offensive playmaking at this point. Like it feels like he's like a capable passer. And it's why I'm still really optimistic about him. Like he's still like a firm top 3, top 4 guy for me in this class. He can sling the ball with either hand when he attacks, but it feels like he really decides like I'm going to shoot it on this play or I'm going to pass it on this play. And until that changes, it's hard for me to see him as more than a guy who's like a third option. Me and Steven were talking about this on our show the other day. Like, to me, like there's a lot of young Andrew Wiggins to him, where it's like there is this athleticism, there is the shot making, there are these physical tools, and like there's times where like you can do stuff. And I think he's probably ahead of Wiggins as a passer. At the same age, just because I think he's more capable. Like the flashes are better. But I just have a really hard time seeing him like leading an offense, where I do think there's more of a case for Paulo to do that. And Paulo's just bigger, and I'm a big like size and physicality guy. And I think Paulo has like a real big advantage there, being, 6'10", 250 or whatever he is at this point. I think with Holland, I'm also a little bit lower on the defense. I thought in the Intercontinental Cup game, he had some really frustrating plays defensively, where at the point of attack, like he let guys get by him a little too easily. He committed some like, that guy got by me, I'm going to foul him, like kind of plays. And like, I don't want to see that kind of stuff. Like if you're going to be this defense first wing, who's also like a shot maker, like if you're going to be like super high end 3-and-D, which I think he can be, because the shot looks awesome. And he's like 85% from the line so far. And even like the shot making he's doing, hitting like step backs and long twos, like I think this guy can score. Like I think he's got real scoring chops. But if that's going to be your role and you're going to be more tertiary on offense because you don't have that sort of playmaking for others blend and feel, then I need the defense to be really high level, and I can't have him kind of taking plays off and things like that. So to me, Ron Holland has been like a mixed bag. Like the shot looks way better than I expected, but I'd say the defense has been worse than I expected. And I was hoping for more like passing progression from the high school film, and I haven't quite seen it.
Julian?
For me, it's honestly what bothers me is the speed he plays at. I know, Max, you were talking about, telegraphing whether or not he's gonna, shoot or pass. He telegraphs his dribble moves.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I see the guy going through, like they worked a couple of times when I was watching it, but it was very obvious he was like it looked to me like he's like planning out, all right, behind the back, cross, step back. And like very like when he decides to just go straight to the hoop, it's great. I see the burst. When he's not doing that, when he's just kind of like waffling around a little bit and trying to break a guy down, it's like honestly really tough for me to watch. I really like I do think he has all the tools to be like a very good NBA player. I just like there's something about him. I don't know what it is. I think it's a gut feeling that just doesn't give that like all-star flash. Like kind of like he's got like the Pat Bev edge, like he has the skills and like on paper, if you were to, if someone were to lay out the skills that this guy had on paper in front of me, I'd be like, oh, this guy's probably an all-star. He had like great scoring games, and I still was like, I don't know. There may be something that I'm missing here, but there's just something about him. Like top 5 pick for sure. I think he's, like I said, going to be a very good player. I feel like there's just like some sort of thing in his game that like I can't quite place what bothers me about it that just doesn't feel like a number one pick in this draft.
I hear that, and I think why I phrased the Paulo Banchero question is because it seemed like going into it, he was far and away a lot of people's number one guy, and that's kind of fallen by the wayside because some of the things that you talked about, Max, and Julian like tapped into it, because there is a lot of like his game looks very different than it did at the high school level already in the Ignite. And I think where I like his defensive floor is just based off of physical tools. I think that he has
Tools are
physical
crazy,
tools
yeah.
to
Agree with
be
that, yeah.
an elite wing defender. But it's just about putting it all together. Like you guys said, he has the ability to pass the ball, but is he going to do it consistently? I don't know. We're gonna have to just see.
It's early. Yeah,
It's so
he's in a
it's
good
so early, and
developmental program too. Like
Yeah.
that's the thing. It's like Ignite. Part of the reason I like guys going to his program is because they get better throughout the season there.
but
and
if
we're
there's
gonna
two
get to see
things that I'm comfortable with him growing into over the course of being in a G League type of environment, it's ability to move the ball and move it quickly and make smart decisions on the fly and be able to defend as a part of a team. I think those are two areas that if you're giving me a player at 6'8" with elite physical tools and elite athleticism, compared to the rest of the draft class, and you say I'm going to make sure that he improves his playmaking and his defense, there's really not many other holes in his game that I really see. I think it's still early to really talk about guaranteeing where he would be in the draft, but I think it's hard to think about the top of this class and he's young as hell. I mean, so young. Like, I think he'll still be I think he'll just turn 19. When's his birthday? I think he'll just turn 19. If not, will still be 18 when he gets drafted. He's 18.
Part of me wonders if like some of the reason that people were discounting this class so early is because a lot of people had him number one. Just a thought,
yeah.
His July 7th,
throwing it out
July
into the
7th
water,
birthday. July 7th birthday. So just around that same time, he'll just about be 19 when he gets drafted. So a young guy. It'll be interesting to see how the rest of it shakes out. Moving on to another guy who kind of falls into that same class, but a little bit of a like age class, but a little bit of a different prospect with Matas Buzelis. I was very, very firm on this guy being my number one guy before, getting my eyes on him in a G League environment. First, like returns off those two games per synergy, played really well in transition, 1.571 points per possession, 1.5 points per possession on the spot up. Shot surprisingly decent around the rim, 61.5%, and 1.23 points per shot as a whole. I don't think that anybody was questioning his offensive game coming in, but I was, not wowed by anything that he did defensively. And I don't think that he's going to be a really like a standout defensive player at any point this year. But I think that for a guy who's 6'11", he's going to be able to defend the rim against smaller defenders. I think that that's something that should be notable. Only allowed 40% off opponent field goal percentage, which 40% isn't anything to go whoa at, but it definitely shows that he's not going to be a liability. And when you look at a lot of possessions, it's just a lack of physicality. I think as a whole is going to be his swing skill is what can he turn into frame wise? Because I mean, if we're talking about this guy at 6'11", he's 220. I mean, he's a frightening player going forward. So where do you guys fall on Buzelis? I think a lot of people thought he was going to be more of a shot creator. I just don't think that's really going to be a spot. I think he's going to be an off-ball player. Reminds me a lot of Franz Wagner at Michigan and early on, especially. I'm curious to see what you guys think, because this was a guy I was like number one pick far and away before the year. Liked him so much more than Ron Holland did. Now I'm like top 10 talent.
Yep. I was gonna say that's around where I've got him. Yeah, I if I can age myself, like Hito Turkoglu is the guy I see a little bit of, where it's like
that's one
the
of my favorite
passing,
players
like,
of all time.
Ball skills are there, but it's like you said, it's the physicality. Like it's so easy to move him, and again, like talked about it a little bit with Sarr, but with Buzelis, it's a much bigger issue because he's going to be more of like a perimeter, put it on the floor oriented player. Where like for Alex Sarr, it's like pump fake and blow by a big, like blow by a big trying to close out on you. Where for Buzelis, it's like you're going to have wings on you. You've got to have a little bit more sauce and be able to create and get to your spots. And right now, it's like you just put your chest on him. He's got to pick up his dribble. Like he can't continue. He can't counter. Like he's just a little awkward in terms of his movement patterns and things like that. Like, and he's not a bad athlete. He just moves weird with the ball. Like if he gets a runway, he's getting up. Like he can finish a lob. He can, compete above the rim on both sides of the floor. Like he's not a nothing athlete. He's just not very fluid and he's not very strong. And I think he can get stronger, but I don't know that he'll ever be like, I guess, positionally strong. Like I don't know that he's ever going to be stronger than his peers in the NBA.
He's never going to be a 4. Which is
no.
Something
God,
that going into the year, I think I was hoping that he would be able to play 2 through 4 and be able to kind of get by proficiently on both ends, at not necessarily on defense, but especially on offense, be able to create on the perimeter while being able to get buckets on the inside. And I just don't think he's going to be able to contribute like that day one in the NBA.
Yeah. So then it turns into like, okay, well then if he's not a shot creator, is he just like a catch and shoot guy? And then if he's just a catch and shoot guy, well then how do you feel about the defense and whatever? Like it can get a little murky for him, but the floor still feels generally pretty high because most guys his age aren't that big and don't shoot that well. So it's like, even if you want to kind of doom and gloom him, which I think you can, and I think we kind of are to a degree, it's still like, that's still a guy I want at a certain point in the NBA draft. So yeah, I'm not totally out on him. I really wish we could have seen him in those Intercontinental Cup games, but yeah, the Perth games left me like a little just leery about how he scores in the half court when it's not just an open catch it, knock it down shot in the half court.
Couldn't agree more. I definitely am disappointed on the shot creating side. I was really hoping for a 6'11" shooting guard, but it's okay. It's okay. I'll hope for another year. We'll get it someday. But it doesn't look like Buzelis is going to be that. Julian, any closing notes on Matas?
He was probably like all the guys that we're going to probably talk about. I was like impressed by, and like Buzelis is the one guy who like through the perf games, like I was disappointed by. I mean, it's generally just like, I mean, at first the confidence wasn't there. He just looks so shaky with the ball in his hands off the dribble at times. And I know like for a guy who's 6'11" shouldn't be able to put the ball on the floor like that, but like that was kind of like the whole hype behind him, is that like he's 6'11", he can shoot and he can put the ball on the floor. And I mean, there were some flashes. He had some nice little like behind the backs to go down the lane at times, but I mean, those, like you guys said, like those were in transition. When he was in the half court, the off the dribble stuff just wasn't there at all. And I want to see, I know you guys don't want to see the 6'11" guard. I want to see if he has a playmaking edge to him, because I think that if there's something there that gets unlocked, I think it becomes a much different conversation around him. But if like this is what we're gonna get, like he's good, sure.
He's not gonna turn the ball over. He's not gonna turn the ball over.
Yeah.
I think he's a smart player.
And like
I mean, look, if this is what Buzelis is, and we're kind of gonna expand on this a little bit better, as the season goes on, I'm not really that excited, to be honest with you.
I'm just waiting for that 130-point outburst where he gets a couple of highlights going across Twitter and everybody's back on the train. So,
dude, I'm honestly torn on whether or not I want to have him, towards the bottom of my lottery or not at this point. And
I actually think that's kind of fair. Yeah. Like I don't hate the reasoning. Like to me, like every year, right? We've got a couple of these guys where it's like, this start of the season didn't look kind of how I hoped it would. And then like everyone just kind of holds on a little too long, and then eventually they kind of plummet. Like it could be one of those. Like I don't want it to be. I want like all these guys to be great and meet their expectations and whatever. But like it's not outside the realm of possibility. I think especially if they're, for whatever reason, if there is like a shooting regression or if the shot isn't all the way there, like it's possible that could be a thing that happens.
Look, it's perfectly fine to tinker guys up and down at this point of the season. And there's nothing wrong. Look, he's still in the lottery. I think he's going to be a top 15 pick, unless he falls off a cliff.
Mhm.
I mean, we're even yet to make our first big board together. That's how
true. We
far we're
haven't-
staying out. That's how
we
far we're
haven't
staying
even
out
made
of
an
this whole
official
big
big
board
board.
conversation. We're strictly
We
calling
haven't
them
made-
watch lists until December or January, dude.
We're waiting that long.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're not putting a 1 through 100 on anybody. I mean, I just think it's asinine at this point.
That's
We
true.
haven't seen
I'm not a big
any
early
single
board guy.
college player like lace up for any team that didn't have a European tour. So it's like, where are we really at? One
Yeah.
guy that I think people are just not doing their homework on, and I think has been, exceeding expectations in my eyes, especially
Here he comes.
offensively, is on Almanza. It's not.
Oh, I thought you were gonna go with Tyler Smith.
No,
I thought you were gonna.
no.
I
No,
was.
he's
convinced.
in a class.
Are
of
we
his
all
own.
Tyler Smith guys?
I love Tyler Smith.
I mean,
Okay,
dude,
all right, awesome. All right, yeah.
I've been a
obsessed with
Tyler Smith guy since day one of OT last year.
Caleb put me on
He was
to the
far and
Tyler
away
Smith thing.
he was far and away my favorite player from that opening day besides Rob Dillingham.
I sort of like I liked him a lot in OT, but then I also like totally cheated on my homework because I heard some good intel on how he was looking like over the summer, and then I was like, oh yeah, top 20 going into the year. Now I'm like top 20 feels low.
I had him tier 2. Like I had him in, and like I said at the top, like in that watch list that we had, me and Julian, like Julian was a Sar guy and I was a Smith guy. We both said that if there's one guy for each of us that can all of a sudden, if we're not picking the same player, because I agreed on the Sar thing, but if we're not picking the same player, what guy could leap dramatically into the top 3 conversation? And both of them, I mean, almost did it immediately. I think that like Smith is a little bit more on the conservative side. I think he's definitely.
Wait, hold on. Can we just
into, like,
talk about Tyler
conversation
Smith now that we've already gotten on the topic?
Fine. We'll talk about Tyler Smith, then we'll move on to Ozano. All right. Tyler Smith. I mean, I don't know. This is one that's like strictly like I could bring out the stats, but I think you have to open with the eye test. This guy just does everything on the basketball court. I don't think that there's one area of his game besides maybe a handle, like a really, really like comfortable handle. And like, he's not really a great playmaker, but again, not a guy who's going to turn the ball over for you. I don't think you want him put him in positions where he needs to play make. I think you'd rather just give the ball in the high post, let him shoot turnaround jumpers, let him spot up, let him crash the glass. I think that these are all things that he does exceptionally well. And then on defense, it's like, holy crap, this dude's a specimen. Like he is all over the place all the time. And these are my favorite type of players. And then, you combine that activity on both ends, especially on the glass, with a jump shot that looks like he might have my favorite jump shot on the whole G League Ignite. Like, I think that he has a lot of ceiling to his jumper. And, I think Holland and Buzelis are probably a little bit farther along just due to reps. I think they've both been number 1 guys on teams. I don't think Smith's ever had that chance. But in terms of comfortability shooting the ball, he looks great. I don't really have much to nitpick besides the playmaking and no real on-ball stuff, but you're talking about power forward. Why do you need that?
That's the thing is I think the role that he's going to be in is going to be pretty simplified. Like, I don't think he needs the stuff that he isn't good at yet.
High value role player is a term that I use all the time.
Yes. And like, this is a really safe floor if he keeps shooting it like this, because this is a guy who's like a legit 6'10" with an awesome body for NBA physicality. I think defensively, like some of the playmaking stuff is like not fully fleshed out. Like there's times where, but like it's all very fixable stuff. It's like, oh, there was a switch situation and he was like sitting back on his heels a bit too much. He was a little heavy on his feet there. Like it's all stuff that like you can tell a guy once and they'll not do it again. Like it feels very correctable. And when he sits down guards, like he can guard anybody. Like he can really guard anybody. And because he's so big too, like I don't know that like the rim protection stuff is at a point where I'd want him like at the 5. I think the 5 is like him at the 5 is something that you really hope pans out. Like it's kind of like a stretch goal for him, so to speak. But when he gets switched on to a 5, he doesn't get eaten alive because he's so
It'll be
big.
more of a Draymond Green type of 5 than, a standard like rim protecting center, if that makes sense. Like more Robert Williams than like a guy who's sitting under like a Rudy Gobert. A Robert Williams to Rudy Gobert type of comparison.
Yeah, so I think he's looked really good. But even like the passing, like we're saying, like, oh yeah, it's like really simple or whatever. But like in the IC Cup games, like he had like a really nice, like, oh, I'm at the elbow and I'm wide open. And I see somebody cheating off the strong side corner. I'm gonna feed the strong side corner. It's a lot of just basic, like, I recognized it, I did it. He makes his decisions really quickly. And this is like a very stupid point, and I recognize how stupid this is that I'm about to say it. My favorite thing about his game is that if you leave him open, he shoots it. He doesn't hesitate. If he's open, he takes the shot. Like,
I have
that
no
is
problem with that point.
it is a paramount skill to being an NBA role player, is being a capable shooter who shoots it when they're open. And Tyler Smith does that. And I don't know, like, he's 6'10". I don't know. Like, the more I think about Tyler Smith, the more I'm like, I just got to put this guy top 10. Like, is he Taylor Hendricks with a better body?
I actually have a different. I think he's like very Jabari Smith-esque, except he plays defense.
Ooh, I loved the Jabari defense tape in college, though. And I think
like,
Jabari was like, he was scoring a lot.
But I
don't know.
think if
I'm
if
like
you
a
say
big Jabari guy.
I think if you
there's
say
shades of him.
Jabari Smith's size and, you know, possible versatility with maybe less of the jump shooting, like maybe less of the jump shooting volume, then you could get me.
Jabari was like crazy
I-
efficient from three.
I think that the way that he shoots is very like just the I am going to rise up over you and there is nothing you can do about it, and I'm gonna make this shot.
But
Like,
Jabari Smith was doing that from like 28 feet, and I just don't think that we're gonna see that.
Tyler
type of
Smith,
shooting.
I have seen do that from the mid range. He can. I
But
mean,
I'm talking like
thing,
NBA range versus mid range. That's where you're just gonna lose me on that. But I
maybe-
hear you. I
maybe he
totally
can
hear
at
you
the-
in like the smooth, the silkiness to his game. Like he's very pure shooting the ball, and I think defensively that's a great comp. I think as a weak side shot blocker, he projects very well to like the type of impact a guy like Jabari Smith Jr. has like day one, if not better.
Well, like the big knock on Jabari defensively too is that he was like a load leaper, which is like different than the flaw that I put out with Smith, but it's similar in that like Smith is just kind of like heavy on his heels sometimes. So like there is some similarity.
I mean, like the catch and shoot with Tyler Smith is like, if you watch, like he doesn't bring the ball like below his shoulders when he catch and shoot. Like it is like one of the from a 6'10" guy to have a release that quick and that smooth is ridiculous considering his age. I mean, he is no doubt probably one of the best shooters in this class. Like, if you're saying it from the jump, like no intel whatsoever, other than what we've seen so far, like based on what I've seen, he's probably going to be one of the best shooters in this class.
I mean, 50% effective field goal percentage on spot ups, 1.25 points per shot on catch and shoot. And then, I mean, speaking to what Max was saying with, you know, just his ability to take open looks and convert, 2.5 points per possession in transition, you know, 1.14 points per shot at the rim. Just consistent. And the stuff in transition to me just speaks to, you know, exactly what you're saying, Max, is he's going to take his open opportunities. And when you're looking for a role player who's going to assert himself in those situations, he pops to me as a guy like, you know, I said it, my biggest thing is these high value role players, and he might be the best one that I've scouted besides Trey Murphy. Like he's in that class of guys where I think legitimately though, he could come in, and he's even younger than Trey Murphy. He could come into a team and, you know, you're talking 3 years down the road and he's your fourth best player. You are a very, very, very good basketball team. And you're thankful to have Tyler Smith instead of drafting some of these other guys that think people are going to swing on, and they're going to overlook Tyler Smith because he doesn't put up 20 points per game consistently. I mean, I don't know. That's kind of my take. I think that's how it's going to shake out for him. I think this is going to be a guy that for those that, you know, like me and Max and like Julian, do our homework and watch the tape and then go and use the advanced numbers to advocate for ourselves, we are going to look very smart by having Tyler Smith this high, this early. And a lot of people are just like Olivier Maxence Prosper. People are going to come around in July and they're going to be like, oh, this guy's a lottery pick. We've been on this train the whole time. No, you haven't. Like Tyler Smith is going to get overshadowed for the first, I think, 2 months of this Ignite schedule by Holland and Buzelis because they're the flashier prospects. But I don't know. I'd be hard pressed to take, take maybe besides Holland, I'd be hard pressed to take any of these guys on this roster and Darlin. But with the Darlin's a different story. It's like a whole different beast because there's just a lot more raw potential there, and especially at the guard position with his plus size. I don't know. I love this Ignite team, and I think Tyler Smith's probably going to cement himself as my favorite. I hope that you guys feel the same way because it'd be so fun. We could be a little Tyler Smith crew. There's definitely not many out there.
One last thing I wanted to throw out on him too is that like I think with Tyler Smith, the floor being as high as it is, the shot being what it is, like why I don't understand why anyone has him in the second round. And I also think that there's like a real dog in him too. That like if you watch those Intercontinental Cup games, like they had one game where they just had this awful start, and like Tyler Smith came in and he was like so fiery and so competitive that like I care about that stuff. Like I just think when you look at the playoffs and guys that win, they're always like guys that can shoot, guys that can move the ball, defend, and are like tough. They're guys that are tough for their positions. Like when we're talking role players, and I don't know, the fact that he's like still second round on mainstream boards is like I really want to know what I'm missing, because I understand like the connective
They
tissue
don't watch,
isn't
Max.
fully
They
fleshed
don't
out.
watch.
I wouldn't say that, but I think
That's what
that
they're missing, Max.
They're not looking for the right things. I mean,
I don't know. I think a lot of people come into the year with like a certain level of expectations and want to like be really moved before they make those decisions. Would be my guess, but
I think everybody just likes to
I
look
just
like the
think
smartest
that's
guy in the room.
obvious.
I think a lot
He's
of
a slam
people like
dunk.
thinking that they look like the smartest guy in the room. And I don't know. I think a lot of these guys that aren't the superstar player on, a college team coming into the year, or aren't the superstar on the G League team, are just going to get overlooked until, like I said, until January, February.
Like Izan Almanza.
I think there's another guy though. Like
I
offensively,
love his.
what don't you want that Almanza can do? I mean, for a guy that you're legitimately considering like a center prospect, 1.423 points per possession plus assists, a 1.33 assist to turnover ratio, 20% assist percentage in transition, which I love. Just his ability to move the ball to the open man quickly and efficiently is just 75% at the rim.
He's a rare.
But I think
center.
the defense is a question mark. Doesn't really have a ton of defensive activity. I think that's his biggest flaw. Is just kind of timid on that end.
Yeah.
Which is a problem if you're talking about him as a big man prospect. But I think if you look at him like a connector 4, he looks really fun offensively. I think that there's some real skill set there. Just really raw. At the end of the day with him. But I was pleasantly surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised every time I watch him play out of Spain.
I absolutely love Izan Almanza. Like one of the better pick and roll players that I've seen come through Ignite. Just like he's one of these guys that for some reason catches almost everything they just kind of throw up towards the rim his way. Like real like hard screener rolls, like just a straight up good, like really solid pick and roll player. Like I think he's one of those guys, and this could go hit or miss, but I think he's one of those guys who doesn't actually like. It would be really nice if he developed a jump shot, but like I don't actually think he needs a legitimate jump shot consistently to be an effective player in the NBA. The pick and roll stuff is just so impressive. He's like surprisingly good off the dribble, for a guy that like can attack, like to be able to attack the basket for a guy that's like mostly just like a rim running big, I think is really impressive. The defensive stuff I think is going to be fine. I think, if you pair him alongside another big, which is what teams seem to be doing nowadays, like you can't really go wrong, and that seems to work in today's NBA.
The fact he had no attempts defended at the rim in those 2 games against Perth, like he wasn't really a factor at the rim defending anything, really like popped to me. Like even when I went back and was like, it can't be right that he didn't have any attempts to defend at the rim. And when I went back and actually watched through some of the possessions where they could have maybe accredited him for some defense, it's like he's just didn't assert himself physically, similar to Bazelis. He's just kind of letting guys slip by him and evading the contact.
Yes,
that was
no.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say that was a big problem in the international games that they played.
Yep.
Was like
Absolutely.
There was a lot of possessions where he was standing and watching on the glass, and like got like there was like one possession where like a big man like took a hook shot, he like contested it or whatever, and then like just didn't get off the floor for a second jump, and the guy got a rebound and like put it right back. Like he needs to have motor on the interior. Like again, like if you're not going to be a good defender, like I need you to work really hard. Like the bigs that struggle defensively, like they really try, and I need to see that from Almanza, because he's just not that quick. His reaction time isn't good. There's no second jump, and like he can stand and watch. And like I think he had like 3 rebounds in one of those games. He's got to make a point of, I'm gonna eat the glass on the defensive end of the floor, and if you're coming to the paint, I'm gonna at least like get after you from a physicality standpoint. And
he was
that's my
weirdly-
concern. It's like if he's not going to be taking threes, I worry like, well, then is the offensive skill level going to be high enough to offset the defense in a way that he can still carve out a starting role?
He
He's
reminds
weirdly,
me
like-
honestly like a bit of his like, I think the best version of himself they can really turn into is like Alperen Sengun is kind of the guy that pops to me, is like if he turns into the best version of himself. Obviously Sengun I think is, you know, nearing like a generational talent in terms of a passer, like a raw like facilitator at his size. I don't think Almanza is that by any means. He's definitely doesn't have anywhere near the flair that Sengun does, but I think in terms of consistency and decision making, but the thing that Sengun does is he imposes himself physically inside on offense, at least. Like when he gets the ball and he knows he has a mismatch, he's at least going to his, you know, he has a little bit of a post bag. I don't think that Almanza is really there yet, skill set wise. But like, again, we're talking about a guy who I think as a role player projects pretty solidly as a first round pick, possibly. Like I think when you look at a guy who can take care of the ball and spread it around like that, and then also just has, you know, I think he just has some raw potential that you just like, there's flashes where you're like, oh, that was a really good play. Like he moves really well on that, or it seems like that's really in his bag. Just a lot of the dishing. I don't know. It was just, I feel like he's like pretty standard, like in every area. And I think the playmaking's like solid. You know what I mean?
He's a weird one. He's a weird one because he's like oddly like more capable when he's out on the perimeter, like especially defensively. Like he like, it's like he enjoys like going out to guard smaller guys and like chop around on the perimeter more than he enjoys like being an actual
shot. Yeah,
it reminds me a lot of
like,
Zachary Richardson. I think we're gonna have similar conversations about him as a prospect.
Because like he weird, like, I mean, you guys are talking about like he has no post bag, but for whatever reason, he enjoys catching the ball at the top of the key and like dribbling to the hoop, and like, you know what I'm like driving as a slasher, but he has no like, he loves pick and rolling. I think he just loves running like straight to the rim on offense, whether he has the ball or not.
Well, that's, I was gonna say too. He does dive to the rim really well off the ball too. It's like the other thing. It just seems like he wants a head of steam for everything.
Yeah, and it's really weird. Like, I don't know that I've ever really seen a big man that's like, it's very like cat-esque, and that like he hates doing like the actual big man stuff and loves doing all the like, I'm 6'11" and I can do cool things stuff. But he doesn't like, but Cat like shot the 3. Like he doesn't shoot the 3. But I think like
2 on jumpers through the Perth game.
If he can like develop into like something under the rim, which he has the athleticism to do. It's not like he's like, you know, like a Yusuf Nurkic, who is like a guy who like, you're not really,
he's not as big of as a stiff as Sengun. You know what I mean? He's not as immobile as Sengun.
Like he's a really, like he has the tools. It really is going to be on him to turn into a legitimate rim protector, because like he has, if you like look at his raw tools, he like very easily can do it. It's not like we're sitting here saying like he's 6'10", he has no athleticism, he moves slow, all he does like, no, like he's athletic. I mean, it truly is like an effort thing, and it's going to be on Jason Hart to like really ensure that they get that out of him. Because honestly, with this team, like if he really wants to be lazy and not protect the rim, they have guys who can do it from the weak side, and Buzelis and Smith. And he's not going to necessarily look as bad as a rim protector because he has those guys protecting him. But I mean, at the same time, like they kind of just need to say like, Izan, like, we're not helping you. You're our guy. Like, block shots and be a big man. And I think that's kind of like, it's weird because you know, Jason Hart does a really good job of putting these guys in positions where that makes them uncomfortable. He did it with Jalen Green. He made Jalen Green look worse. He made Jaden Hardy look worse. Like from a, you know, from a watching perspective. But at the end of the day, when we've seen these guys get into the NBA, it's had a better effect on them. I'm curious to see what that looks like for Almanza, because I think it's going to be a lot of him like doing actual big man stuff and like getting offensive rebounds and blocks, which
Yeah. I think the one thing that I really want to see with him is just like a commitment to defensive mobility, because I think I'm a little bit more concerned about the athleticism than you are, especially with just like how well he gets off the floor. Like I think he can move really well laterally and like forward and backward and whatever. It's just a matter of like, are you going to commit to getting up off the floor time and time again?
he does it for
He's very
dunks.
much like Sengun. I don't see much of the vertical. Like there's very limited vertical spacing. That's why I don't think he's really like as a roller. I don't think that he's got like incredible. I think where he's at as a roller is where he's gonna be at. Like I
But
don't
it's weird
like
because
another evolution to that unless he can start shooting the pick and pop jumper.
no, but Caleb, it's weird because like you say that, but I mean, if you look at some of the lobs that he's putting down, like the way he gets off the ground for those, it's like legitimately impressive. So I mean,
Athleticism is something that we see with a lot of NBA prospects. I don't doubt that. I'm definitely with Max on the athleticism thing. I think it's going to be a big thing that limits him, especially on the defensive end. I'm not even worried about the offensive end. I think the defensive end is where it's like, I don't know where he projects defensively. Like you guys were saying, he seems like he's a lot like Zachary Richhiser, like I said it, where it's like this guy is at like 6, Richhiser's 6'8" to 6'9" ish. Almanza's obviously 6'10", but they look much more comfortable playing on the perimeter defensively than they do near the basket. So I don't know. That's just kind of my take on it. I see him as like a first round guy though in my eyes. I think that he can still turn into a first round prospect, but do we think he spends another year with Ignite? Is he going to be like some of the guys that we're talking about later on here? What do you think,
I don't think so. I think he's still ready to go.
All right.
yeah, I'm with Max. I think he goes. I think there's a couple of other guys that we're gonna get to that are gonna spend 2 years with Ignite, but I don't think he's one of them.
Well, I mean, the two of the guys we're going to talk about, briefly, I think that we should wrap it up, kind of towards, but we have, really 4 guys left that are considered draft prospects, I think, especially for this upcoming draft that are Ignite guys. I think that a lot of people's favorite, like under the radar one is going to be Thierry Darlin by the end of the year. The 6'6" guard from, Africa, and he's a dog. Like, I think that there's some legitimate reason to believe that with some solid production throughout the year with Ignite, that he could be a guy that rises into lottery conversations. Obviously, it's way too early, but I think the physical tools, just the raw skill set. I don't think that he's got that bad of a jumper. I think the handle's pretty good for where he's at. I don't know. I think that defensively, he could be really, really special, especially at his size. So I don't know. Where do you guys kind of stand? It's hard for me to keep him out of my head. This is a guy who's going to be top 10 in my eyes by the end of the year. I just feel like I don't know why.
He's my like I have no take yet guy. Like he's the guy where like I watch the film and I'm like, there is so much happening here, good and bad. Like there is some stuff where it's like, oh man, he can put on the floor. Oh no, his handle's out of control. Like, oh wow, he can shoot it. Look how willing of a shooter he is. And like, oh, that was a brick. Like it's all so up and down, and like sometimes those guys figure it out, and then sometimes they have kind of like City Sissoko, where like a guy like City Sissoko, like just teams didn't really like him in the pre-draft process. Like they had him in and they were like, we don't know what to make of this guy yet. Like it's too up and down. So I'm just kind of in a real like, I'm going to wait until I see him on a G League court. He's just kind of like a watch list tier guy for me. Like I have a tier of guys where it's like, I'm not ranking them anywhere because I don't really know what to do with them. And I don't know, maybe that's like a flaw of mine as an evaluator to like not just constantly be like, oh yeah, this is where that guy goes. He goes.
I think that that's a strength.
Nothing wrong with that.
And I think when you're obviously open about it, it becomes a strength, especially. But I
love Thierry Darlin.
It's going to be up and down, but I think that what you highlight up on the upside though, where it's the good stuff, I think that there's a real reason to believe that he could be somebody that rises into not only a first round conversation, but maybe even a little bit higher. I don't know are the raw tools not like, as exciting enough to talk about him as a draft pick though, Max?
Oh no, I think they could be. Like I think like anyone with like that set of tools who's just like in any league shown an ability to like really play good basketball is worth considering. And like on paper, I guess I'd probably be more interested in him than like London Johnson. Like if you put a gun in my head and you're like, you got to pick one, it's like I'd way rather bet on that than
That's
like
what I mean.
London
That's what I was literally
Johnson.
gonna do. You stole it from me.
Yeah.
That's how we're
Yeah.
gonna wrap is who do you take over Darlin, Pate, Johnson, or Sane? And I don't think for me there's none of them.
I kind of like Babacar out of those guys.
I love Babacar.
I love
honestly,
that Babacar just like looks like you hit like DeMarcus Cousins with like a shrink ray. Like I like that he's like 6'6" and just like bulky and physical and can play really tough downhill, get to the line a lot, has real touch if it's not a dunk, and is a willing shooter. And like he's curving the turnaround problem. The turnover problem isn't nearly as bad as it was last year. Like I think Babacar is going to be like a sneaky maybe first round guy this year.
I was surprised. I was like kind of like watching him play. I was like, all right, well, like there's no chance this dude can shoot. And then I watched him shoot, and I was like, oh my god, wait, this guy can actually shoot. Like he's fun. He's a fun one. I think like I don't know what he's more of like a CD guy, kind of guy for me because I don't know what position he plays.
Because he's like too short to be a 4, and like I don't know that he's quick enough to be a 3. And like I know everything's amorphous and positionless basketball, whatever. But it's like no, you're right. Like that's a real concern.
Like, does he play the 2, the 3, or the 4? Definitely not the 2. He's way too big and bulky to play the 2. I mean, can he guard a guy like a Jason Tatum kind of player or Kawhi Leonard, PG, with like those kinds of guys at the 3? Like, is he long enough to be able to do that? Certainly, they're not gonna back him down. That we know that's not happening. But he's fun. He's a fun player to watch, and I enjoy watching him play. That's kind of the big hang up for me, is kind of the same hang up I had with CD last year of like, is this guy like a 2, a 3? Like what's going on positionally here? Where does he fit? Because I think like skill wise, like sure, like Babacar Sane is fun. Like same with Thierry Darlin. Like I loved Thierry Darlin. I was watching a lot of his I watched a game of his today and it was just like, oh my god, like this kid is long. He shoots the ball. They're like, it's funny. They're like polar opposites. Babacar Sane is like short and stubby, and like Thierry Darlin is this like long, skinny guard. But it's kind of like the same dilemma. Like, can these guys do enough things consistently that's going to put them on the map at X position in the NBA in X role? And there are these weird, like, unrolly role players that I don't really know how to define. And I think that's the fun part of Ignite is like, Jason Hart's gonna like put them into some sort of role, and we're gonna see what they can do. I mean, Johnson is like a guy I'm not really convinced on him, just to kind of get all
turns the ball over too much to be a good like a lead guard, which is I think that would be the only outcome where he's a prospect, is if he asserts himself as a stable distributor and a guy who can, he's going to have no problem getting to the basket off the drive. I think that he's got great athleticism, which is, not something that a lot of these guys on Ignite struggle with, being good athletes and having, physical tools. A lot of them, if not all of them have, plus wingspans, good positional size, even at 6'3", Johnson's a bigger guard, but I'm not sold on him. I'm not as sold on Babacar as you guys are. I think that the consistency is going to be a big thing that I'm going to fall back on. That just 100%. Like his flashes are great. And I mean, when you see the 30-second, highlight chains on Twitter, he looks awesome. Like he looks really fun. And I'm right there with you guys. I think that the DeMarcus Cousins like shrink ray thing is very real. But I don't really know where his ceiling or his floor is, honestly, but I'm excited to find out. I think that he's he's the oldest player out of all these guys. So I think that he's definitely is going to have the opportunity to assert himself as a solid scoring option for this G League Ignite team. And I'm curious to see how it goes, because, the numbers through the Perth games weren't great, but then, he kind of tore up their other games so far. So well, what is it going to look like when he gets
Yeah.
into the kind of the standard G League competition where we can kind of, really scout them all on a playing field, like a level playing field across the same games against the same opponents. I think these guys that are at our bottom four, if really at all, because I think all of them still could make cases for first round or, solid second round draft picks throughout this process. But Sane's the guy that I'm okay with, having like a borderline first round grade. I don't know where anybody can convince me London Johnson's going to be any, in that top conversation, but, still a solid guard prospect. I think that he's got some real athleticism and,
he plays really tough.
Yeah.
Like, I think that was like the biggest thing that stood out in like the FIBA games was like, he really wants to get into the paint and like he can set guys up well. And like, he generally takes good care of the ball, but then like at the same time, his spatial awareness feels really bad at times. Like he's looking way more confident with the pull up in the three, which is good. Like that's really important. He needs that.
He looks great in the pick and roll.
Even then, like they were, they were like size mismatching him on defense already. And like, I don't
him
love
and Sane on defense were not thrilling to me.
I just
far from it.
I'm so low on guards in general right now that like if you're like a traditional guard size player, like you need to knock the doors off me. Like I need to be so impressed by what you're doing, or else like I'd rather just spend the draft capital elsewhere, because like look at Kennedy Chandler, look at Ty Washington, look at Sharif Cooper, look at like all these guys in recent years, Trevor Keels, even, who's like a bigger guard, like defensive first guard. Like if you're not just like a lights out shooter and super consistent playmaker and a plus defender, like teams generally will just go somewhere else. They'll just get a guy who's 28 years old on the minimum that does those things. And like they don't really have a developmental stake in you, because like what are they going to develop you into? A guy who's also going to get paid a minimum contract? Like that's not what teams want to develop. They want to develop guys that like will earn money in the NBA by being valuable. So I don't know, like I hate to be like a huge downer about London Johnson, but like for me, he's just a guy that it's like, it's tough for me to put him on a draft board right now, because I'm not interested in that developmental project. And that could change. Like if he's ending the year shooting 40% from three and he's continuing to take care of the ball how he is, like, yeah, then maybe that's a guy that like you look at in the second round and you're like, he's just more actualized than these other players, and I'd rather take him. But I'm just not excited about anything he does.
No, yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with just like philosophy wise, with you about, just kind of my draft philosophy, how it's shifted. And it's definitely, this is how I started off. I was lucky enough to kind of start off with this perspective of positionless basketball and moving towards like all players being plus size players, and really shifting the average position height from, point guards being 6'2", 6'1" to being 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". And, your every player on your roster being above 6'8" or 6'7" from there. And, when we were going through and making like our initial like watch list for college, like, I mean, I was almost not considering any player who's a sophomore or older that was under 6'3". I mean, there was just a very, very low chance that I was going to add him to our list. And then, we've kind of circled back around on some of the guys that played very well, like, the Stavieskis out of, and other guys like that are undersized guards that, just are worth noting college wise. But especially when you're just like looking at a amateur and a pro-am type of environment with G League Ignite, kind of what they're going for them. Going straight to the pros, I don't really see where he's going to take like a huge leap like you're talking about, Max, where he's going to all of a sudden be a 40% from three shooter. And it's like, oh, there's a completely different prospect. He has a whole new ceiling as like a game breaker from the perimeter. I think his best trait is his pick and roll playmaking. And he's got the athleticism to turn himself into a scoring threat out of that action. And, that's a great European basketball player, or even,
it could be a really good third guard. Like he could be a good third guard. Like
there's definitely good outcomes for him
off the table, but even then how much do you want to pay a third guard that's like that big? And I'm not saying that like you should look at basketball through the perspective of like, how much are you going to pay every player? But it's a good idea. It's a good way to gauge value.
I know.
It's like, so
what contract grouping is he in is a great filter on the spreadsheet. It sounds like that'll probably be added to ours, Julian, courtesy idea. Baum. Dink Pate, and then we'll get out of here so we can all get on with our nights. I haven't watched a whole ton of them.
Who?
6'7", kind of off guard wing. So I mean, obviously I'm going to be interested. And I dug in a little bit. Solid shooter. Seems like he's going to be able to get it done from behind the arc, but mostly like a slashing type of player. Has some good upside, I think, is a 3-and-D wing, but very, very raw. Kind of the overarching, very similar to Darlin, but you're looking at him more as a wing than a point guard type of prospect.
Yeah, I like Darlin's. I mean, I didn't get to see a ton of Think Pate, but from what I saw of between him and Darlin, I like Darlin's upside a lot better. I just think that I don't know, man. He's wing dunk ball, wing shoot three. Like it was just kind of generic high school tape that I don't know. We'll see what happens. I mean,
That's where I'm at. Yeah, he's a
I'm
wait and
not.
see.
I'm much like Darlin is the guy who I'm like, yeah, I think this guy could, escalate into the club. Pate is like Max said, my no take guy. Like I want to see him actually get like a minute on the court before I can him and Darlin didn't even play these first two exhibition games, which was interesting in its own right. But
I think Darlin still. I think Darlin was.
Darlin's got some sort of injury. Yeah.
He had some nagging injury.
It's not bad, whatever it is. Because I think there was videos of him warming up and practicing and stuff. So it's not debilitating or anything.
That's good. But hopefully we'll see him report soon.
I think this conversation couldn't have gone any better, to be honest, because I think we all found out that we're relatively on the same page with a lot of these Ignite guys and even Alexander Sarr. And philosophy wise, this is, every year it seems like we're going to have one of these pods with the Ignite guys and maybe talking about, I think next time we'll have to have you back on, Baum, maybe talk about some more of the
for sure.
It's like Bobby Clintman, and we'll have you come back around and I know Julian just got really excited and upset that we didn't include him in this pod, but he's a Bobby believer over there.
So Steven, we gotta do our international pod on the Draft Sickos episode next week. And I know Steven's a huge Bobby guy. I like Bobby Clintman, but Steven's the Bobby guy. So
yeah,
it'll be a good time.
We're definitely high on him last year. Julian was high on him really, really early, and then I kind of took over the train at the end of the year. Once he start, there's a stretch in the second half of the year where he just tore up efficiency wise. So I think if you put him in a position where he's going to be a number one guy, he's really going to blossom. And I think if it's not, Alexander Sarr, the best player coming out of the NBL is definitely going to be Bobby Clinton. But then you got to talk about AJ Johnson. There's so many good players still out.
NBL's going to be fun this year.
And then that's not even getting to Urchizer, Topic. All these.
Do they have an NBL League Pass?
You can watch they put their games on YouTube for free, which is awesome.
It's not that
so here is my question, because you guys are big time sickos. So you guys are deep in the prospect mud like I am.
Try to be.
Lachlan or Ulbrich, were you as blindsided by him being good in the NBL as I was? He was on Riverside last year. You see Riverside, and he was good, he was productive or whatever. And now he's playing in the NBL, and he's good, actually good, and might be a draftable guy. And I just was not prepared for that at all. I considered him for no son unturned. And I looked at him just not seeing it. And then I moved on, and then I watched him in the NBL, and I'm oh my god, this guy could actually possibly get drafted this year.
I like Lachlan. I don't really know if I consider him being, I don't know. I think that's a great question, because I don't know if I really am.
4 or 5 guys are tough. The 4 or 5 tweener guys, they're always scary.
I'm gonna have to get back to you on that one. I think that I'll need to re-dive in. But for Riverside last year, I didn't think that he was somebody that would pop as a prospect at all. So that's kind of my as much as you're going to get out of me, because I honestly haven't watched a ton of what he's had to do his game this year. I've just heard things. I've heard that
he's moving well. He's just moving really well. Still needs to shoot more. He's not taking a lot of jump shots in the games that I've seen, but he looks and moves like a pro. Like if he starts shooting threes this year, I think he could be a good second round.
Is he
pick.
still just primarily from midi, just kind of working people down, or?
Yeah, it's been a lot of like dribble handoff orchestrating and then like clean up around the basket kind of
Fair enough.
stuff in the games that I've seen. So it hasn't been the scoring as
18
much
feet
as it's
in,
been like
15 feet in,
movement,
kind of.
movement, defense, passing size.
Okay, sweet. I'll definitely have to check more of him out. Definitely not a name that I've heard some things. I've heard people high on him, especially over the last week, but I didn't realize it was that deep with it.
It might be a real thing. Yeah,
Okay.
like there's a real chance that he could be a guy.
I have not
All
gotten
right.
to watch any of my NBL film yet. Sounds like I got some work to do.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love
channel.
it. Always love the homework. We'll probably wrap it up here. So this went a little bit longer than we wanted to, but I think that the conversation
Happens
was so
every
fun.
time.
Nobody minded. But Max, got anything going on fun? I know you guys got your season 3 of No Ceilings coming up, and you guys just kind of pivoted to the Draft Sickos show. So give a massive audience a taste of what you guys got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so NoCeilingsNBA.com is where all of our written work is. Prospect Overview, my weekly column, is going to be on Mondays this year. So Monday is when you're getting my weekly column now. And then Monday of the No Ceilings NBA podcast feed, Draft Sickos, me and Stephen Gillespie getting after it, covering everybody from the biggest stars to the deepest sleepers. That's our bag. Do you guys want a spoiler on week 1 Prospect Overview?
Ooh.
All right,
Let's hear it.
So we're not even gonna put this part on Twitter. This is staying here, so you gotta listen to this to get the exclusive.
Ooh.
Week one prospect overview. I'm gonna announce it on Twitter at some point, but we'll just leave this here for a while. Let it simmer so that the real fans get the dirt. I interviewed Mark Mitchell for week 1 of the prospect overview, and I'm writing about why I think he's like a near lotto player. So
I'm behind that.
Interview with Mark Mitchell, as well as a full breakdown of his game for week 1, and then got a similar kind of tier guest for week 2. We're keeping that one under wraps too, but we've been making moves behind the scenes this year, so year 3 is going to be big. We're really excited.
You're gonna love this.
Yeah, we have a couple coming up too.
We have one going up on Wednesday. We have conference preview with Tyler Metcalf. We did the pack. No, we did.
Yes. No, but that was with Rutgers. Jesus Christ! It was the A10 and the Ivy League.
A10 and the Ivy League.
Yeah. I was talking to Metcalf about that one. Yeah.
So we definitely got in our bag with the sleepers on that one, and we have, for the real fans here at the end, we have a film breakdown coming up with John Lovelace Jr. That'll go up in the next couple of weeks. So we're gonna talk about some of the things that he's hopefully added to his bag, and I'm gonna highlight some of the stuff I put together the film. So we're gonna highlight some of the stuff that I loved from his game. Some really, really fun defensive clips there that I think you'll love, Max. That'll be YouTube exclusively, so that'll be really fun. The Mark Mitchell thing, I'm hyped for that. That's like one of my guys.
Dude,
last year
It was a big get. Yeah, I was very excited for it. I just love his game. Like, he was one of those guys, and like I kind of started off the article writing about it. Like, Duke had so many guys last year, and then every game, like, I just find myself watching Mark Mitchell too much. And it's like, oh man, like I got to be taking notes on Lively, I got to be taking notes on these guys, but it's like, oh, Mark Mitchell's a dog. Like Mark Mitchell's a winner. Like, I
watched the game too
like
similarly.
Yeah, I like him a lot after interviewing him too. Like, I was really impressed with where his mentality is and how he sees his game and the game of basketball in general. And like,
awesome.
I'm very worried that teams are gonna like not value him enough and be like, he didn't score like 20 points a game, and then they're gonna miss on like the most obvious playoff.
He can do everything. He can literally do everything.
Max, you summed it up. The most obvious playoff role player that people for some reason don't realize how good he is.
Yeah. Those kind of guys like slip through the cracks every year. Like, I feel like even like Christian Brown was one of those guys to a degree where it's like, oh yeah, like just a hyper competitive guy who's like an NBA athlete.
And Abaji was
like,
too.
Yeah. Like, I think just the productive guy that doesn't score a ton of points is like a huge market inefficiency.
Well,
the guy does like everything and has an NBA body and like fully understands how the game works. And
he is fully cemented in that same tier with Tyler Smith and our tier 2 of that first. And he's higher than any player on Duke that we have on our watch list at this point. I think he's far and away my favorite prospect on that roster. And, Jared McCain's probably going to be second over Kyle Filipowski, but that's for
Jared McCain buzz is like,
that's for another day.
Jeez.
We can't
big.
get into this, Max. We
Yeah,
can't.
we can't. We gotta wrap it up.
We're going down another rabbit hole within the rabbit hole.
We appreciate your time always. We'll make sure to drop all the links. I'll make sure to go get the link to the most recent, because this will likely be uploaded on a Thursday or a Wednesday. I'll make sure to include the link to your column from this week. Obviously we're filming this on October 2nd, but it'll go up at least a week from now. So I'll make sure to get yours from next week, and hopefully also add the link to the Mark Mitchell thing if it's out yet. But we appreciate
so if this is coming out next week, do you want the week 2 spoiler too while we're here?
Let's go.
Week 2 spoiler. We got Milo Suzan for an interview.
Oklahoma guard, love it.
Yeah,
he's gonna have a great year.
He is.
As much as I'm upset that Otega Owe is basically going to never get a chance to play any real minutes for Oklahoma, and as much as that breaks my heart, and Julian knows that, because I think me and Julian had probably about 30 conversations last year where I was on the way home from the library after watching film from the night before or the last 2 nights, whatever, and it was just always, bro, Otega always got to play more minutes.
So good. Otega always so good. Why doesn't Otega always play?
Why isn't he
Jared Murray, I think, was at one of their practices today and posted on Twitter that Owe's looking good. So let's not completely squash the Owe dream at this point. It could still happen for him. He's young.
It was the game against Nick Smith in the EYBL final again, with like team final versus like Brad Vila Elite, where he just absolutely clamped and like took Nick Smith Jr.'s lunch the whole entire game. And since then, I've just been like, this guy's got to play real minutes somewhere. So I'm happy to hear that. Uzan's gonna be great. That's gonna be a great backcourt for Oklahoma. So I'm excited to hear about that, and definitely make sure that'll likely be linked in the bio as well. So again, appreciate your time, Max.
Both of them, dude.
We'll link everything. We love Baum.
Sure.
We love Baum.
Appreciate it. Yeah, always glad to be here.
Yeah, appreciate your time. We're off the clock.